G'day everyone. If you've been riding around the Fremantle traffic bridge detour on the southern side of the river this week, you might have noticed a couple of new signs that have appeared. These weren't here on Wednesday the 19th, but they had appeared on Thursday the 20th, so I think this is a good step forward, because maybe what we're finally seeing is an identification of risks and hazards, particularly those pertaining to cyclists. Now, I don't know if a hazard or risk review was done at the start of this project, and I don't know what risks and hazards were identified, but maybe it wasn't done. Maybe the register's completely empty. I don't know. I would say anyone that cycled on this path more than a couple of times could clearly identify a couple of risks or hazards. So the first one is that the risk of a collision on the narrow path between path users. So this could be a cyclist on cyclist, cyclist on pedestrian. I doubt you'd have pedestrian on pedestrian. These could be head-on collisions. They could be rear-enders, because there's just no room to move on this path. Now, the other risk, of course, is at the bus shelter, and this really only happens when you're approaching from Stirling Highway, because the bus shelter is L-shaped, so it's got a solid back and it's got a solid side on the side coming from Stirling Highway. It's got a big ad on it, and you can't see anyone sitting at the bus shelter on the seats there. So what the risk is you got one or two people in the bus shelter, you can't see them, and just as you go around the corner, which is a completely blind corner and it's a narrow path, they decide to step out, and they run into you or you run into them. So I think we can clearly identify those hazards. The question is, what do we do about them? Now, clearly, if you're fit, if you're an adult, if you're a confident cyclist and you're on a mountain bike, you can just run off the road to get around this issue. But that's okay in summer when everything is dry and this isn't an absolute mud pit. Same for this bus shelter. You can avoid that by cycling around the back. But what will happen if everyone decides to do that and nothing's put down over the grass to stop it being, well, torn up when winter comes? And how do you deal with families with little kids? This is a particular issue. So we can see this family on their way to school, I guess. Maybe they do this on a regular basis. One of the issues, of course, with riding with kids is they don't ride in a straight line like adults do. They don't have the fine control that we have, where we can pass each other or get past things without running into them. Kids just have a tendency to wander back and forth all over the place. They need a lot more space. The other thing is, you don't want kids riding off the path, because that's a great way for them to crash. I've seen so many kids, including my own, have a stack when they go off a path onto the grass and then try and come back on again, and their wheel gets caught on the lip and over they go, and there's usually tears and a bit of blood. So we certainly don't want that. This particular bit of footage recorded back in February, and I was chatting with this kid's dad all the way across the bridge. We started talking at the other end of the detour, and I was asking him about his experience of riding around here, and he said this was the first time he'd done it with his son. He normally rode on the road. He was a confident road cyclist, and he'd never used the detour before, was only using it because he was with his kid, and he thought it was quite abominable. Didn't like it much at all, particularly after the incident at this corner where the crossing seemed to be okay at this point. We're all going to get across safely. And then the son gets halfway across the road here and whoop, seizes up, has a panic attack. And thankfully, all the drivers there stopped for us and didn't run us over. That could have been an absolute catastrophe with 3 people run over by a car turning that corner. Wouldn't have been a good result at all. But that's the kind of thing you've got to worry about when you're cycling with kids that don't have the road experience that adults have got, and really don't know how to handle themselves in situations like that. And Dad was talking to his son all the way along, telling him what to do, hoping he was listening, and essentially coaching him through this. So they actually missed the detour on the other side of the bridge because he was so busy coaching his son on where to go, that he didn't have time to read a lot of the signage, and he said they got completely bamboozled and messed up. And yeah, that was one reason why he was not particularly happy with this detour and how good it was. But back to the signage. Let's think about the hierarchy of controls. Where does it fit in? Well, right down the bottom in least effective. What have we been talking about for the last 6 months or so? going up the top of the hierarchy and going to elimination. And how do we do that? Well, one way is to widen that path into something or probably twice as wide or even wider, and especially going, well, avoiding that bus shelter. I'm not going to say going around the back, there might be another solution, but you've got to get rid of that risk of the collision between bus passengers in the shelter and cyclists coming around the blind corner. Elimination is what we should be aiming for, not the PPE down the bottom. Anyway, thanks for watching for this episode, and see you in the next one.